Grand Archive TCG has some new starter decks, seeing the return of possibly Grand Archive's most iconic character, Lorraine. This time around, she shed her Arthurian legend garb for some futuristic cybertech gadgets. Hi, I'm Eva, and I'm ecstatic, to give you a first look at the Lorraine Arclight Saber starter deck. We're going to talk about every card it comes with, how I recommend you play them, cards to potentially swap in and out, go over most of the nuances with the new mechanics, and hopefully answer your questions that might come up. This starter deck has a 2 out of 5 star difficulty rating. The way it plays is fairly straightforward and should be a good continuation point for a newer player who already grasps the basics of the game. There's essentially only one new major mechanic you'll have to learn, which is that of static counters. The box comes with a fully sized standard legal and ready-to-play deck with a 60-card main deck and 12-card material deck. If you're lucky, there is a small chance you'll find a shiny CSR, Collector Super Rare, signed full art version of one of the cards called Arrest Lightning. As for the deck's identity and playstyle, it features the basic element Fire, the advanced element Arcane, and the class of Warrior. I'd say its archetype is mid-range with the potential to go aggro. It is almost a purely offensive deck with a small amount of defense available. You will want to play many allies and weapons and engage in combat every turn. Then when you fully leveled up and gained the power of Arcane and Lightning, Static will begin to build between your objects, allowing you to jolt your opponents for extra damage. This is the deck list of all the cards we're about to talk about. Marked with a red asterisk are the ones that are currently exclusive to this product and can't be found in other decks or booster boxes. Well then, let's go ahead and charge into this new deck. Your deck is all about your champion, and your journey will begin as a simple level 0 Spirit of Fire, draw 7 cards. At this point, you may only play basic element cards, the Fire and Norm cards. As you level up, your level 1 champion is a familiar face with a makeover. Lorraine Wandering Warrior returns but with new art. On enter, materialize a weapon card with memory cost 0 from your material deck. Lorraine then gets a brand new level 2 with Lorraine Honed Operative. On enter, banish up to 3 cards at random from your memory. For each card banished this way, draw a card into your memory. If that card is advanced element, put a durability counter on a sword weapon you control, and it gets +1 power until end of turn. Got that? Just in case, let's run through this again. On enter, you may choose to banish 0, 1, 2, or 3 cards from your memory randomly. You must declare how many you're banishing from the get-go, rather than seeing what gets banished and deciding when to stop based on that information. Let's say I banish 3 cards from my memory, then I'll replenish all 3 by drawing 3 back into my memory. Now let's take a look at what the banished cards were and count how many are advanced element. In this deck, advanced element cards are comprised of arcane cards and this card, which is Fire, but you'll see it has a special gold frame at the top which denotes it's also exalted element. Exalted means that this card is enabled for you only if another advanced element is enabled, and exalted itself counts as an advanced element. Going back to the 3 cards that were banished, 2 of them are arcane and 1 is Fire, therefore 2 are advanced element, so you will put 2 extra durability counters on your sword weapon. These are permanent and will allow you to use this sword 2 more times during the course of this game. This sword also receives a temporary buff of a total of +2 power, but only until the end of the turn during which you had become level 2. So here's a tip. Be sure that if you intend to use this level 2 ability, which is optional, you don't have to, keep an eye out on your durability counters so that you may still have a sword on the field as you level to 2. Now let's check out what Lorraine's new striking level 3 looks like. This is the payoff for having hopefully banished a bunch of arcane cards while you were leveling up and using your level 2 ability. Introducing Lorraine Arclight Saber. This champion is of the arcane element, which now enables arcane cards for you. And here is a mechanic that is entirely new to Grand Archive. On enter, put level static counters on Lorraine. Then, for each of up to 7 arcane element cards in your banishment, put another static counter on Lorraine. This is followed by reminder text that explains how static counters work. Ahem. Whenever an arcane element unit deals combat damage to an object, you may remove a static counter from this unit and deal 1 damage to the object that was dealt damage. Whoa. Okay, one more time, but with some clarifications, and we're gonna cover most of the basics of how static counters function here. The on-enter ability, once again. Put an amount of static counters on Lorraine that matches your total level. This is usually 3 because you're a level 3 champion. However, in response to this on-enter ability before it resolves, you can play Arcane Sight. This card says, your champion gets +1 level until end of turn. Draw a card. If you do this, you'll now be level 4 and will get 4 static counters to start. Then, for each of up to 7 arcane element cards in your banishment, put another static counter on Lorraine. And the reminder text about static counters. Whenever an arcane element unit deals combat damage to an object. Pausing here. Your arcane element units will include both your champion and your allies that are arcane element. They have to deal combat damage specifically, meaning your champion or arcane allies have to be either attacking, or in the case of your allies, they're dealing retaliation damage by being attacked by an opponent while they're awake and have a power stat. Importantly, your attack or retaliation must hit for at least 1 point of damage. If your opponent prevents all of the damage, static will sadly not trigger. Alright, continuing. Whenever an arcane element unit deals combat damage to an object, you may remove a static counter from this unit and deal 1 damage to the object that was dealt damage. Meaning, each instance that combat damage is dealt, you are allowed to remove 1 static counter off of each object you control that has static on it. Let's say, for example, my Fulgurite Coordinator, which is an arcane ally, attacks and deals damage to my opponent. At that point, I can remove 1 static counter off of it to deal 1 more damage. I can also remove 1 static counter off of my champion, and 1 off of my sword, and 1 off of my Surge Coordinator. I've now dealt 4 extra damage in the aftermath of this 1 attack. Oh, but my champion has 6 static counters on her. Can I remove all 6 at once? Unfortunately, nope. Each individual object can only do a little zap 1 by 1. The idea is that you build up such an army of fuzzy friends that all have static counters on them that these little zaps add up to damage that your opponent simply can't ignore. And of course, the static can only hit the object that was dealt the combat damage in the first place. It can't choose to redirect it anywhere, unfortunately. A few more clarifications about static counters. Number 1. Although what triggers the static is dealing combat damage, the actual damage done by the static is separate, non-combat damage. Number 2. The removal of static counters are optional triggers that happen 1 by 1. Essentially, you don't have to commit to how many static counters you're using from the get-go. You can remove 1 static counter, see how your opponent responds, remove another one, see what they do, and decide not to remove any more static if you don't want to. Number 3. Each static individually pings for 1 damage. Removing 4 counters from a total of 4 objects will not deal 4 damage. It'll deal 1 damage 4 times. This will matter for cards such as Safeguard Amulet. Speaking of which, for now let's put static down. We're ready to talk about the Regalia cards of your material deck. Let's go! First off, we're gonna just bolt through the staples that you'll often see in starter products. Safeguard Amulet, as I just mentioned. For every instance your champion takes non-combat damage in the turn you use this, it will block 4 of that damage. Your opponent using this would rudely cancel all static counters hitting their champion for a turn. Tariff Ring, a defensive tool to make your opponent pay 2 reserve cost per attack for 1 turn. Life Essence Amulet, draw a card if your ally dies during your opponent's turn. Bauble of Abundance, everyone draws a card. Next will be your arsenal of weapons and battle equipment. Reliable Blade will be the 0-cost weapon you grab with your level 1 ability. It comes in with 1 power and 2 durability and class bonus. As long as you have 3 or more advanced element cards in your banishment, Reliable Blade has Spell Shroud. An object with Spell Shroud can't be targeted by spells. This sword is safe from cards such as Disintegrate, which is trying to mess with your stuff. Another sword is Clarent, Sword of Peace, though it has 1 memory cost. And this ability. Remove a durability counter from Clarent. Prevent the next 1 non-combat damage that would be dealt to each unit you control this turn. Unlike Safeguard Amulet and the more popular Clarent card, this Clarent ability won't block for every instance of non-combat damage for the turn, just the 1 for each unit per durability. However, it does protect all of your units, which is great for a certain non-combat damage board wipe. And there are options to give Clarent more durability if you'd like. Finally, your electrifying arcane element weaponry. Fulminator Rising Storm is a fancy sword with 1 power and 3 durability. It says, Fulminator enters the field with level -2 static counters on it. With you being a base level 3 champion, usually it'll just gain the 1 static counter, but again it calculates your total levels so you can again manipulate this using Arcane Sight. How very nice, it comes with a free static counter, which you likely may feel tempted to pop right away for damage, but consider leaving it there because of this next card.
Jovian Hilt X Ultra.
Ooh, this is a 1 memory cost warrior accessory that links onto a sword weapon as it enters the field. If the link is ever broken, usually if the sword is attached to runs out of durability, then this hilt also breaks and goes to your banishment. It's got, on enter, put a durability counter on linked weapon. Then, if that weapon has 1 or more static counters on it, put 2 static counters on Jovian Hilt X Ultra. Linked weapon gets +2 power. Just a reminder that this card looks at whether the sword it's attached to has static on it, and if it does, the hilt itself gains the 2 static counters, not the sword. This is great because the more objects you own that have static, the better for everyone to contribute to the zapping. With that should give you a good idea of how the Arcane Lorraine deck plays. Let's move on now to the cards of the main deck. Throughout your gameplay, you'll see this deck has 3 main goals. In the early game, you'll be looking to discard cards of value, and possibly dealing damage. In the late game, it's all about static counters and dealing damage. So we'll begin by looking at the cards available in our discard package. Within this, there's also 3 categories: discard enablers, discard fodder, and discard payoffs. To discard means that you choose a card from your hand and put it into the graveyard. With the cards that enable discarding, you'll see some cards that are like confusingly inferior versions of cards we've seen before. Creative Tinder. Draw 2 cards, then discard a card, but at slow speed. If you see this card in early game, you almost always want to use it to go essentially +1 in influence when paired with floating memory. Package Courier is a 1/3 ally with on enter, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. We also have a new attack card which only costs 1. Ember Slash deals 2 damage and has, on attack, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Now what sorts of cards are we looking to discard as our fodder? I'd say anything with floating memory, with a priority on the card Return Stroke if you see it, since banishing it will increase your arcane count in banishment. If you don't have floating memory, you can also discard these arcane cards that have a banish this card from your graveyard ability since you can use those later. Back to floating memory, Forging Heat will be your fire float card that puts a durability counter on target sword weapon you control. That sword gets +1 power until end of turn. This is a pretty fantastic card either to play or discard, it just really helps glue the deck together. Other discard fodder is Honorable Vanguard, a vanilla 1/2 ally with floating memory. Now here are some other payoffs that you can get for discarding cards. The ally Tindered Soldier says, whenever you discard a fire element card, if there are no buff counters on Tindered Soldier, put a buff counter on Tindered Soldier. It'll then become a 2/3 ally for only 2 cost, which is above rate. But surprisingly, I actually didn't find this ally gaining that buff counter most of the time. So you may not want to play it unless you also see a Forging Heat and a discard enabler in your hand. It's fine, it's just not as consistent as you'd think it'd be. A very similar payoff is Flame Tech Blade Core. It's the only card in this deck with the Exalted element. As a reminder, Exalted is only enabled for you when another advanced element is, so you can only play this when you've already gained the power of Arcane at level 3. But this card also counts as a fire card, so for things that care about discarding fire, if you're desperate enough to toss one that doesn't have float, it's technically an option. As for what it does, this is another warrior item accessory, though it comes in your main deck instead of material deck. You link it to a sword of your choice, and it also becomes a link shield for it. If linked object would be destroyed, destroy this object instead. Then it also grants this. Linked weapon gets +2 power and has, whenever you discard a fire element card, put a durability counter on this weapon. In certain matchups where you're worried about your opponent blowing up your sword after you've spent a ton of effort fueling it up, this will help protect it. On to the next section, which is about damage. Let's go over some of the ways you'll be dealing damage in this deck. Though note, we are saving all of the static-related cards for later. Blistering Insurgent will put in a lot of work for you. It's your best aggro play. It's a cheap 2-cost ally with baseline 2 power and 1 life. But during the turns where your champion has attacked, which is probably most of the time, it becomes a 3/1 ally, so very annoying but squishy, she dies easily. Once you've reached level 2, Banner Knight is almost always your best friend. Level 2 will unlock its ability of other allies and weapons you control get +1 power. And with this thing having 3 life, your opponent will have to put in at least a little bit of effort to get rid of it. Things can really spin out of control if you have a lot of allies on the field. Bringing a similar effect of juicing up your army is the attack card Stoked Slice. It deals 2 damage and has, on attack, you may banish 2 fire element cards from your graveyard. If you do, allies you control get +1 power until end of turn. So you could say that this is another payoff of discarding, but usually you just kind of naturally accumulate the cards in graveyard, so I wouldn't go out of my way to discard just for this. Note that this effect snapshots, so if you play any allies after using Stoked Slice, those allies have unfortunately showed up too late to receive the power boost. Another power boost card,
Roach X Ultra,
is an Arcane Warrior item accessory that comes in linked to an ally of your choice. Linked ally gets +2 power and has, on attack, banish a card at random from your memory. If you do, draw a card. It's a nice way of refunding a card back to hand, though if the ally this is linked to dies or leaves the field for any reason, this accessory must be sacrificed. Not the best value you could get. Lastly, earlier in this video, I mentioned Return Stroke because it's an arcane element card with floating memory, but it's also a 2-powered attack card that escalates according to your total level. So in most cases, this would be an attack for 5 damage with floating memory that you can use to bring out the hilt. Such value! Here's our last section of cards. It's time to talk Static Shock. We have a whole gang of ally friends ready to thunder and rumble on the battlefield. Of course, all of these are arcane element, meant for the late game if you level up to 3. First at bat is Fulgurite Coordinator, a 1-cost 2/2 ally which makes her extremely convenient to play, though she dies easily. She enters the field with a static counter on her. She also has an ability that can be used from the graveyard if she dies or if discarded. It has element bonus, meaning your champion must have arcane element unlocked to use this ability. Pay 1 reserve cost and banish this card from your graveyard. Put a static counter on target arcane element object you control and each object linked to it. This is where you'll find the benefits of linking accessories onto your weaponry and allies. The static buildup connects and compounds. As a reminder, object can refer to anything on your field, including your champion, weapons, items, and allies. Play as many of these Fulgurite Coordinators as you can, then bring out Surge Coordinator. On enter, put level +X -3 static counters on Surge Coordinator, where X is the amount of other objects you control with 1 or more static counters on them. Oh boy, math. Basically, you want more levels and you want more things with static counters on them. So Arcane Sight and Fulgurite Coordinator, pretty good for this. But if nothing has been done to manipulate your level, then shortcutting this calculation is very easy. Simply count how many things you have that already have static counters on them. Boom. Surge Coordinator also has an awesome stat line of 2 power and 4 life, making her harder to remove. And same applies to Rumble Coordinator, another 2/4 ally. She has Vigor, meaning she wakes back up at the end of your turn. So you can use her to attack, wake up, then on your opponent's turn while she's awake, if something else were to attack into her, and she deals retaliation damage, and she survives, you can remove static counters to zap zap. Rumble Coordinator also gets +1 power for each static counter on it. And, on death, if there were 1 or more static counters on Rumble Coordinator, draw a card into your memory. Unfortunately, she doesn't come with any static counters, so you'll want to use one of the Banish from Graveyard effects and choose her as the target to put a static counter on. Or, Conductive Strike is the SR, super rare, card of the starter deck, and only comes as a 1-of copy, so if you find it, it's a 1-power attack card, but gets +X power, where X is the amount of objects you control with 1 or more static counters on them. which is usually just okay. I think this next part is cooler. It has this on-hit effect, meaning your attack has dealt at least 1 or more damage. You may pay 2 reserve cost. If you do, put a static counter on each arcane element object you control. You might be thinking, oh awesome, with this combat hit, I can now spend all these new static counters I just gained. No. Yeah, so only the objects that already had static counters on them before this effect can remove a static counter right now. It's a bit complicated, but the timing has already passed for the trigger asking if you'd like to use each static, so the new static just can't be asked that question. And finally, this is kind of almost the last card. Arrest Lightning is one of 2 defensive options in this deck, with prevent the next X damage that would be dealt to target unit this turn, where X is the amount of static counters on that unit. What's nice about this card is that it prevents any sort of damage, whether combat or non-combat, and the shield can apply to multiple instances of damage if it hasn't all been soaked up yet, since it says the next X damage this turn. This card also does one more thing, having the exact same Banish from Graveyard effect, where you can pay 1, banish it, and get a static counter on target arcane object and everything linked to it. So don't forget to reuse, recycle, all that jazz. Alright, actually this is the last card. There's just nowhere better to put it, so I thought I'd squeeze it in next to the other defensive card of the deck. Deflecting Edge is a norm card, so you can play it early game and anytime. Typically costs 1 reserve, but it's free to activate as long as you control a sword weapon. And it prevents the next 3 combat damage that would be dealt to target unit this turn. Again, only combat damage. And that will cover every card that comes in this starter deck. Now, let's spend a bit of time discussing strategy and tips for piloting this new Lorraine. Tip number 1 is simply housekeeping. Dice. You will need dice, preferably 2 different colors of them. One to represent static counters and another one for durability and buff counters. Oh my goodness, there's so much dice management with this deck. Also definitely make distinct piles in your banishment and graveyard, or at least stack cards in different angles so you can pick out certain ones. In your banishment, you'll want to do this for the arcane cards, and in the graveyard, it's the floating memory and the cards with banish from graveyard effects so that you won't forget to use them. Tip number 2 is about your overall strategies. You'll have the most success with the starter deck going one of 2 routes, and usually you need to choose which adventure you're treading early on. If in the early game you find that you have a lot of damage-dealing cards that are not arcane, it is very possible to win by trampling with allies such as Blistering Insurgent and buffing with Banner Knights without ever dipping into the arcane side of the deck. Just pure aggro. Or you can do the opposite. Focus on getting to level 3 with as much value as possible. This will entail seeing floating memory and ways to discard it. Hold on to your arcane allies, don't banish them, don't be tempted to do it just for the static counter, to be able to play them onto the field once you've hit level 3. And on that note, tip number 3. Lorraine's level 2 Honed Operative might just be a trap. Remember, this is the one that allows you to banish extra cards from your memory, so you can get more arcane cards up there, and therefore more static counters. Well, the starter deck doesn't quite require Lorraine to have that much static, because there's only one card, Arrest Lightning, that cares about a singular unit having multitudes of static. Lorraine already comes with 3 by default, and you might banish some arcane naturally just while leveling up. You can be pretty happy with just about 2 arcane and banish when you level up to 3. Any more might just be a waste of a powerful arcane card that you could have actually just played. The worst thing that could happen is you reach level 3 with no arcane allies that can be deployed within the next couple turns. Tip number 4 sounds crudely obvious, but you actually do need to be careful that things don't die before you can use the static counter on them. For instance, if you have a sword out with 2 accessories linked to it and they each have static counters, say your sword is on its last durability and you use it to swing. Well, at the exact moment the game sees that you've dealt combat damage, it also sees that the sword is broken and all of its links are sacrificed. You will tragically watch all of those static counters disappear into the ether, so be sure to replenish the durability on your weapons if you're gonna invest in them. The same rule applies to an ally that's either attacking and receiving retaliation damage, or is being attacked and deals retaliation damage. If they die from this combat, then there's no chance to use the static counters that are on them. But at least your other objects are still able to zap in that moment. Our last tip is kind of a higher level, not as beginner-friendly one, regarding the accessory Jovian Hilt X Ultra. You can utilize sneaky windows of opportunity to create more flexibility with it. Let's say you want to attach it to one of your swords. It doesn't even have to be Fulminator. And that sword right now doesn't have any static counters on it, which is what the hilt will check for. The hilt only gets static if its sword already has static. So you'll materialize the hilt, have it linked to the sword. Then, in response to the hilt's unenter ability, you can do a fast speed action before it resolves. Now's the time you can use either Fulgurite Coordinator or Arrest Lightning's Banish from Graveyard effect to add a static counter onto an arcane object of your choice, plus everything linked to it. If you choose the hilt, it'll then add static to both the hilt and the sword. Thus, as the hilt's unenter ability resolves, it sees that its sword has static and charges up even more. Yippee! As for upgrading this precon, I want to make these limitations clear. For the purpose of this video, I'm only interested in maintaining the identity and playstyle of this deck, with the fire, arcane, static, and everything. I was also granted an early preview of the starter deck, so there are probably many other cards of interest which just haven't been revealed yet at the time of making this video. Without that information, it's hard to say whether Fire Arcane Lorraine will end up being meta-relevant or not. We'll just have to see. Firstly, if you would like to just make some simple and affordable swaps, there are bulk cards costing less than 20 cents each that will do the trick. Hasty Messenger, replacing Package Courier. Flame Rune Swordsman, replacing Honorable Vanguard. Tempered Steel, replacing Flame Tech Blade Core. Rending Flames as an alternative closer, replacing Stoked Slice. And you could use Creative Shock to replace Creative Tinder, or you can consider running both if you'd like to lean more discard strategies over ally ones. On the other end of the price spectrum, here are a few cards that would make luxurious upgrades to this deck. Of course, I would encourage you to make sure this deck is worth committing to before you go out of your way to buy any of these. Angelic Channeling is a strong floating memory card that can temporarily give you more advanced element cards in your banishment for when you go to level 3 and get your static counters. It does work, Source, trust me bro. Liminal Guide. I mean, you'll be discarding and leveling up a lot, so this is just a ton of value.
Capacitance X Psycho
seems to be Lorraine's signature arcane sword. You can potentially activate it, bring it out during your main phase, without needing to spend a materialization phase for it, which is a godsend. Then, it doubles your static damage and makes it unpreventable. Very exhilarating.
Staves X Ultra
is Arcane Lorraine's ultimate. It's a sword accessory that can be used in two different ways. One is by paying its very high cost to buff and protect your sword. But really, the better route is, instead of playing it, you allow it to be banished from your memory in some way. Then, it has an effect from your banishment where it gives you static counters each turn. Finally, I'd like to introduce Lorraine's canonical partner in crime, Picarda, Knight Rider. She's also expensive, but as her bestie, you can sacrifice static counters to pay for some of her reserve cost. She is quite difficult to remove, and bongs for 7 damage as long as she's attacking a champion. Oh, I love her, she's so cool. And there we have it. Thanks so much for watching. All of my appreciation to the Grand Archive team for allowing me this cool opportunity. Shoutouts to Main Deck Dan, who has created a video covering the Dante Hemomancer starter deck. Go check that out, it's a deck of big, powerful, bloody spells. And thanks to Foam, Andrew, and Connie for helping me playtest this deck. Other places where you can find me, I'm on a podcast called Talk GA, where we talk about anything and everything Grand Archive, and my main channel is where I do singing covers. Enjoy Arcane Lorraine, and happy zapping! Zap zap.